Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here today. So my name is Camille Lowell. I'm a second year UCE Ph.D. student, advised by Dr. Teneber Allen. And so basically in the fall, Terrence Rice and I, who helped organize this event as well, we had this vision of celebrating Black History Month and celebrating Black engineers. And we were kind of just searching to see what we could do, and we happened to stumble upon Dr. Johnson's name, and her story was absolutely incredible, and she is a Rice alumni, so we are so happy that this event came to fruition, and so happy that you all are joining us today. So I'll now bring up Dr. Ashutosh Sabharwal, who is the Department Chair for Electrical and Computer Engineering at Rice University, to introduce our special guest speaker.
Thank you. By the way, this event was completely done by our students, so I'm really proud. They told me. Of course, I took credit for it when I was talking to our provost, saying that, see, we mentor our students so well. My name is Archie Cyborg. I am the chair of the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, and I wanted to welcome everybody. It's great to see events in person. We're slowly getting used to the idea of coming in person. I'm very sure some people are searching for a Zoom link right now, only recognizing there is no Zoom link for this talk. It's my great pleasure to introduce Rice alumna Dr. Sandra K Johnson. Dr. Johnson has a long distinguished career as a technology trailblazer. She is the founder, CEO, and CTO of Global Mobile Finance. It's a fintech company located in Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. One of their products is G-Remit. It's a relationship-driven remittance mobile app for Africa. She's also the founder of SKJ Visioneering, a technology consulting company. She's also a visiting scholar at North Carolina A&T State University and a director on the board of directors for Regional Management Corporation. Dr. Johnson has achieved many firsts in her long distinguished career, and we're going to hear more about them today. She's the first African American woman to earn a Ph.D. in computer engineering. She had a 26-year-long distinguished IBM career, including serving as the CTO of IBM Central East and West Africa. She is a master inventor with over 40 pending and issued patents and over 80 technical publications. Dr. Johnson earned her BS from Southern University, MS from Stanford University, and PhD from the West University, Rice University. All in electrical engineering. She is an IEEE Fellow and an ACM Distinguished Engineer. We are absolutely thrilled that she's here to share her journey with us. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sandra K Johnson.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to Dr. Ashutosh, and of course to Terrence and Camille, who had the vision to make this happen. It's certainly an honor and a pleasure to spend some time with you talking about my experiences in my career. Now, I can honestly say this is the first time I've been invited to a university to not give a technical talk, but to talk about myself. So I'll spend some time, talking about my experiences, and I want this to be a conversation, right? So if you have a question, raise your hand, I'll recognize you, and we'll have that conversation. I also want to say that I want to have this conversation by telling stories. Studies have shown that storytelling is an effective way of communicating so that recipients can really hear, what the story is all about. And in fact, storytelling activates a function in the brain that's called a neural coupling. That is, that you hear the story and you can relate it to your own experience and therefore do a better job in remembering. So I will share with you some stories from my experiences. So let's get started. So I was born in Fukuoka, Japan. My father was an enlisted person in the Air Force. My mom, who's with us today, I'll cover it up in her blood. Was there as well. And I was born there. When I was 2, my father was killed by a drunken driver in an automobile accident, leaving my older sister, who's also here, myself, younger sister and brother. So my mom raised us as a single mother. She never remarried. And she always said to us, she moved back home, we were in Massachusetts, back home to Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is just 2 hours down the road, east of here. And she always told us to always study, do well, to make a better life for yourself. We had everything we needed, and as a child, you want things, right? Very few things we wanted. So I was encouraged and motivated by these words. My mom tells me this story that when I was in kindergarten, I was a very shy child. And she noticed that kindergarten graduation, I was instructing my fellow students, get in line and do this. Now, of course, I don't remember that. But, she shared that story with me and others, to say that it was in me to lead, right? Even when I was not aware. And then when I went on to elementary school, I went to a segregated school until the 5th grade, at which time integration came in the summer between my 4th grade and 5th grade school year. So I changed schools, but the only thing that really changed, always had, at least in elementary school, black students, but the teachers changed. Right, so it was an integrated school. Went on to junior high school, that's what it was called back then, and integrated junior high school. About 60% white, 40% black. And my last year in junior high school, I became president of the student body. Going on to high school, again, integrated, 60%, 40% black, and did well. Took all of the STEM-related, science, math, algebra, you name it, courses. Had a good time, did well. My junior year in high school, my high school had what was called the Wildcat Nation, which enabled students to learn about presidential campaigns. So every year in which there was a presidential campaign, and for me this was 1976, our high school was divided up into 2 parties, the Nationalists and the Federalists, and each party nominated a president and vice presidential candidate. So for me, I was the vice presidential candidate for my party. I was a junior, and myself and the presidential candidate, Jimmy Prochet, won. Which was unheard of during that time. So I was the first black person to do this. Also the first black person to be president of the student body in my junior high school. And so those in our wall in January of 1977, just like, I think it was Jimmy Carter, who was president, just like the Carter inaugural ball, etc. So it was a way to learn about presidential politics, but for me, it was an opportunity to blaze a trail early in life. And when I was in high school trying to figure out what I wanted to do, the adults around me, including my extended family, my mom's sisters and brothers-in-law, my aunts and uncles, and as well as others, encouraged me to pursue medicine. And I do not like the sight of blood. I still get queasy. So that was not an option. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But one day, I received a letter from the Southern University Engineering Summer Institute for high school students that enabled high school students to spend the summer on campus, live in the dorms, and learn about engineering. Now, at the time, I really was not interested in learning how to drive a train. While I thought it was a noble profession, what I was interested in doing was getting away from home so I didn't have to wash the dishes, which I, to this day, ask my husband, do not like to do. And so I applied for this engineering summer institute and was accepted. And off I went to Southern University in the summer to learn how to drive a train. When I got there, that's when I learned about electrical, civil, chemical, mechanical engineering. Fell in love with electrical engineering and felt as though this is what I was born to do. I just knew it. It just clicked, I connected, loved it. And so that's what I decided to major in college. And Southern University is an HBCU. So that's where I went. I did get a scholarship to go there. Spent 4 years there. And I can honestly say it was the best 4 years, chronologically, of my life. Had a wonderful time. It was a very supportive environment. We all supported each other. Yes, it was competitive, but we considered each other to be members of the same family. So it was very supportive. I did get a fellowship, a gym fellowship initially, after my junior year to go to graduate school. I wasn't quite sure I wanted to go to graduate school because it takes a long time, and I wanted to go out and make some real money, right? But the summer before my senior year in college, I did spend a summer at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab as part of the gym fellowship. I hated it, did not like this work. And so as a result, I shared this with the administrators. And so they then switched me to a new company, Bell Labs, for that particular program. And then my senior year, I learned that Bell Labs had a fellowship program that paid more money than gym. So of course I applied for that. There was a Ph.D. program. Now remember I said I did not want to stay in school a long time. So my thinking was I'll apply for this, have more money to live on, and then when I get a master's degree, I would drop out of the program. That was my plan because I didn't want to stay in school a long time. But I was afraid I'd get hit by a car. So anyway, off I go to Stanford University, which is where I decided to go. And that was a different environment from Southern University. Looking back over it, one could say it was hostile, but I did not treat it as though it was hostile. I'll give you an example though. So my first class, the students of the class were required to create groups and work on problem sets together as a group. And this happened actually for most of my classes at Stanford. So at the end of the first class, when everyone's, forming their groups, every student that I approached to ask to be in their group literally looked at me up and down and said, we do not want you in our group, including the women. And so at some point, I'm standing around scratching my head going, what am I going to do? I need to be in a group. And then I noticed a classmate from Beirut, Lebanon, came over to me and he said, I noticed you have some difficulty, forming a group. He was experiencing the same thing. So we became a group. There was another student, an Aboriginal from Australia, who also experienced the same thing. See a pattern here, right? And well, those two were some of the smarter students in the class. So what happened with every single class, something similar. So I ended up, in the best groups for my classes, in spite of the adversity that I faced. I also had a network, very strong network of Black graduate students. None of us were in the same field, so we could not help each other academically. But we did provide moral support to each other, and very strong moral support, which was very helpful to me. And in fact, one of the students that I hung out with was a social butterfly. So she would put together, these social events, she would just say, okay, it's cost this amount, show up at this time at this place. Off we went to horseback riding on the beach in Half Moon Bay, which is right on the Pacific Ocean, or we went camping in the California redwoods north of San Francisco. I mean, we had a wonderful time, and it was a great outlet to just relax and have fun, because it was very, very difficult, stressful time. Also, another opportunity for assistance, for support, is there was one class I took, and I had a problem assignment, and I just couldn't figure out how to do it. I tried everything. And one of my friends, the social butterfly actually, she said, well, in my graduate dorm, we're having a study break, which is a break. They have refreshments, you can chat, relax a little bit before you go back and do some more work. And so she invited me to her study break. I went, and my good friend from Beirut, Lebanon was there, right? So, I hadn't seen him in a while, so, I said, what's going on? And I told him I couldn't solve this problem. So he said, come with me. So we went to the cubicles, and he sat down and gave me enough information, providing me with the right guidance and direction that I can then use to go back to my dorm and finish the homework, right? So later I said to him, so why did you decide to help me with this? And what he said was, when I first came here, in the first class I was in with you, and you came over to me and had a conversation. You seemed very interested, because, and we did, he had spent 24 hours getting to San Francisco from Beirut, and I thought that was amazing. So I'm listening very attentively to his story. And he said, no one else did that for me. And I appreciate the fact that you took the time to have a conversation with me. So this is the least that I can do. So I always was able to endure the obstacles, etc., in grad school at Stanford as a result of that. Now I want to go back to the story about dropping out of school when I got my master's degree. So while I was on campus one day, actually waiting in line to make a copy, there was an elderly man who was using a copier. And so another student who was with me said, do you know who that is? And I said, no, I don't. He said, that's Dr. William Shockley. And I was like, well, who is he? And he was an emeritus professor at the time, who was very well known in his field of endeavor. But as a hobby, he conducted research that he said quantified that blacks were inferior to whites. And so I was like, oh, really? Well, we'll see about that. I'll make a believer out of him. And that is the reason why I decided to change my mind and stay in school to get a Ph.D. Because many times is that type of negative view, disbelief, and of me and my abilities that drives me to move forward and make things happen, right? So I decided to stay. But after Stanford, which is very grueling, emotionally, mentally, which turned into physically experience, I was ready for something different. And so the Bell Labs Fellowship that I had me with a mentor. And so I went to him and had a conversation with him about my thinking about, I think I'm going to move to another school to work on my Ph.D. And he is a vice alum, Ph.D. in ECE. So he suggested that I consider Rice, which I did do and applied. And a couple of weeks after I submitted my application, I got a call from a professor here at Rice, Dr. Faye. And he was all excited. I've been trying. I have been doing everything that I could to get blacks to apply to the PhD program. And here's an application that lands in my lap. I'm so excited. I hope you come. And it turns out that he was in the field that I was interested in, and so he then became my advisor. And so off I go from California to Houston, Texas, and became a graduate student at Rice. And so he was very supportive of me in this process. But I will tell you a story. I was here at Rice maybe a few weeks, and I went into a lab. And it was a lab for graduate students. And the lab assistant, I went in, I sat down, and I started working. And so he stands next to me. I'm sitting, he's standing, with his hands on his hips. And he says to me, I believe you're in the wrong place. And so I looked up at him, kept typing, and I said, no, I'm not. I'm in the right place, right? Of course, I knew I was in the right place, but he didn't. So we've been back and forth a few rounds. I believe I'm in the right place. No, I'm not. Eventually, he started asking me questions. Who's your advisor? What are you doing? Etc. I convinced him that I was a graduate student, a Ph.D. student, no less. And he was a master's degree candidate, so he kind of figured out I could teach him a thing or two about the discipline. And he did apologize. He apologized. And my response to him, because, my initial reaction was to tell him where he could go, give him a highlighted roadmap to get there, But I held my tongue because I'm thinking, okay, he probably hasn't seen anyone that looks like me before as a graduate student. So he probably thinks he really knows what he's talking about. So Sandra used this as an opportunity to educate him. Right? And so once I convinced him that, yes, I do belong here, he apologized, and I said to him, that's okay this time, but the next time someone who looks like me walks into this lab, don't be so sure about yourself. And he shook his head, yes. Right? And of course, I can share all the stories, but you get the picture, right? And so, yes, it was difficult. I would be lying if I told you it was not. But it was the support of family and of friends and my advisor that helped me one day at a time, 1 month at a time, get through the program. There was a time where I actually hit a wall. I would try my best to make progress in my research, and I made no progress. And my advisor noticed this before I did, and suggested that I take a break for a semester, just relax and take it easy. Because he said when he was in his PhD program at the University of Illinois, the same thing happened to him. And he took a break and went fishing, just relaxed and had a good time. And then when he came back, everything clicked, and he finished shortly thereafter. I was not willing to do that because I was not sure I would come back if I left. But after several months of still making no progress, I seriously considered his suggestion. By this time, he had actually left Rice University and went into industry. But he was still an adjunct professor, so I kept him as an advisor. So I then went to the department chair at the time to have a conversation about possibly leaving and coming back. That department chair was Dr. Sidney Burris, who recently, last year I think, passed away. He was very, very helpful. He became a mentor. He understood this happens sometimes. So, and he explained to me the process of, leaving and coming back. Had to drop out and reapply, but it was really a formality. And so I did. And I went because I had an AT&T fellowship, and I worked for Bell Labs for a semester. And then I came back. And less than 6 months later, I was done. I was finished. And I graduated. So that really helped. So I share all of these things to share with you. In spite of the obstacles, I was able to, with the support of family members, friends, mentors, etc., to move forward. And so when I was close to finishing and I started looking for jobs, what am I going to do when I graduate? I knew I wanted to work in research, but not as a professor. So I started looking at industrial research labs, governmental labs, even industry, working in development, for example. So one day, as part of that process, I come into my office, my graduate student office, and I noticed there was a man there talking to one of my office mates. And he, introduced himself, hello. Oh, well, he said hello, and he introduced himself later. And then I sat down and started working. And once he was done with his conversation with my office mate, he came to me, introduced himself. He was a Rice alum who worked for IBM, Thomas J. Watson Research Center. And he was there to talk to students who were about to graduate because they were looking to hire some Rice Ph.D. Students, graduates. And so we had a conversation about what I was doing, and he got really excited. Right? Now, that's a big part of the story. I ended up working for IBM T.J. Watson Research Center as a result of that encounter. The issue that even he had was, he said, so no one told you I was coming? I said, no. He said, well, I contacted the office several weeks ago. I told them I was coming. I told them the type of student that I was looking for and wanted to talk to. And they set up a schedule for me to talk to students, but obviously you were not on that list. And most of the students that they talked to, they wanted to go into academia, not industrial research, right? So he scratched his head and couldn't understand what was going on. I said, don't worry about it. we found each other in spite of this, right? And I did go have the interview. The first person that I met was a woman named Fran Allen. She was a researcher at IBM, and she took it upon herself at that time to host any female IBM research candidate, right? So she hosted me. She put together the schedule of who I was going to talk to. She took me from one place to the other, etc. And she became one of my greatest mentors, right? I did not know who she was. But this woman is very, very well known, particularly when it comes to compilers. She eventually became the first female IBM fellow, which was the highest ranking technical position within IBM. She was the first woman to win the ACM Touring Award. For those of you who may know about that award, it's the highest award from ACM. Very well known, very successful, and she was one of my mentors. And she reached out to me. And so I started out at IBM. I did well, I was having a good time, enjoying myself. Was thoroughly enjoying research. I was part of a team that really worked well together. We were also a little mischievous. What do I mean by that? Well, from time to time, there would be seminars, many conferences at the Watson Research Center, the main center, which is in Yorktown Heights, New York, just north of New York City. And so we would know anytime there was a conference because there would be signs pointing visitors to where to park. And we would say, yes, okay, meet you at 10, meet you at 2 or 3. So what we would do is show up during the break to have the cookies and the coffee. That's what I mean by mischievous. Or we would go out and, today is, February 23rd. Somebody is born on this day. Let's go out and celebrate, right? So, we would do these things, work well together, and did some amazing things. We were part of the team that built Deep Blue, which was IBM's chess machine, right? So I had a wonderful time, and for 9 years, life was wonderful. And then one day, I received an email about a conference that I was invited to attend. So off I go to the conference. I meet this woman there who does not introduce herself, but she says to me, she grabs me by the wrist, "Oh, Sandra," she says my name tag. She pats her hand on the empty seat next to her. "I want to talk to you about being an IBM executive." And so I was like, "Oh, thank you, but you guys work too hard. I'm not interested in spending, morning, noon, and night working all of the time to be an IBM executive." And she goes, "Uh-huh." And so what I learned shortly thereafter is that she does not take no for an answer. And so she found a way to get my attention, which she did when she called one day. And at that time, I'm a Delta. I was president of my local Delta chapter. And, I was having a difficult time with some of the ladies. And so she called me one day when I was in the midst of this. And so she said, "So, you're president of your Delta chapter?" I said, "Yes." "How many women are in the chapter?" 150. "Okay. So, you're managing 150 highly opinionated, strong Black women who like to get their way." I said, "Yes." So, I want you to know that anyone who can manage 150 strong, Black, highly opinionated women can be an IBM executive. In fact, it's probably easier to be an IBM executive. Okay, so that got my attention. So we had a 2-hour lunch in Alma, New York, which is, the corporate headquarters of IBM where she worked. I learned that she was the first Black woman vice president of IBM. And we spent 2 hours having this lunch where she would ask a question, she would react in disbelief, and direct me to do something about it. So, for example, "Do you have stock options?" My response, "No, I don't. That's only for IBM executives." And her response, "Ask your manager." So we went back and forth for different things for 2 hours. I go back to my office, I go to my manager's office, and I ask him about stock options. And he says, "Well, they're only given to IBM execs." And I said to him, "Could you look into that, please?" He said, "Okay." 2 weeks later, I got stock options. And everything else that she asked me to do, I did. And all of a sudden, she's angry initially when she hears my responses. She introduced me to other IBM execs, primarily Black. They all get upset about what was not happening for me, right? And so what I didn't know at that time is that they all got together at a point within IBM when it was, quote, safe, unquote, to get together to help others in the organization. And they found the high potential folks using HR. That's how they found me and reached out to me. And they put together plans for helping each of us. They didn't tell us. So for me, I thought it was out of the blue. It was very well planned. It was strategic. And so as a result of that, they all became mentors. Many of them became sponsors, champions. And what does that mean? That means when you're in the room with the door closed, and you're having conversations about who do you think would be a good person for this job, they would speak up and say, "Well, I think you should consider Sandra for that role." Okay. And so there was a time where I was on vacation in Florida, and I got a call from my manager. "Sandra, I know you're on vacation. I need to speak to you as soon as possible. Please call me as soon as possible." So I speak to him, and he says, his boss's boss's boss, like 3 levels up, which means it's 4 levels up for me. Just created this job for you. And he described it. It was a CTO role. responsible for global small and medium businesses. And he wants you to take this job. And he explains it to me. And then he also says to me, I don't think you're ready for this job. I tried to convince him to give it to so-and-so, which is one of his boys, quote unquote. Like, how do you told this to me? So I said, so he said to me, so you can ask me questions about the job, but you do not have the option of turning it down. So I asked a few questions. And then he said to me, did this guy tell you he was creating this job for you? I said, no, this is news to me, right? And so I do the job. A couple of months later, I'm at an event, more or less to close out the work that I was doing with him as the lead. And he comes up and he says to me, you know, I'm really concerned about you and this new role. I really worry about you. And so this was like the day after. There were 9 CTOs, so the first 3 actually did a presentation to this guy, you know, 4 levels up. So myself and 2 of my peers did a presentation to him and the people that reported directly to him. And so after the presentation, he pulls me over to the side and he says, Sandra, you know, my team and I, we talked about your presentations and we all agreed yours was the best. Keep up the good work. So I tell my good friend about this at the reception, and, you know, who told me he was worried about me. And I said, you don't have to worry, I'm doing just fine. Right? And so there were many, many other examples that I can share with you, but I think you see a pattern here, right? I can also tell you about the IBM Academy of Technology, which is modeled after the National Academy of Engineering, right? Where the existing members select new members. So I had 3 people, all candidates for the IBM Academy are required to have 3 sponsors. So my 3 sponsors, 2 of them were IBM fellows. No one other candidate had 2 fellows to sponsor them. One of those fellows, by the way, was Fran Allen, the woman that I met, you know, when I arrived at the Watson Research Center for an interview. The other one is Martin, a black man who is the inventor of the IBM PC. So those laptops that you all used to, you know, he came up with a bus and other patents that more or less facilitated the use of personal computers and laptops as we know today. So 2 IBM fellows and 1 other woman, right? And so I get a call from one of my former colleagues. I was living in Austin at the time. He was in California. He said, I have a business trip. Let's go out to dinner while I'm there. And, you know, we would do this all the time if we ended up in the same city. We had worked on projects together primarily to increase the number of women in computing at the Ph.D. level. So we have dinner. We ordered dinner, I should say. And after dinner, he goes right to work. He says to me, I see Martin has taken the lead and nominated you to the Academy. He says, what could he have been thinking? You do not measure up. You know, I'm here in Austin because the Academy leadership is having a meeting. And we have gone through the database to look at the candidates. This person has this, you don't have it. This person has that, you don't have it. Don't get me wrong, you've done well, but not at the level that requires, that would warrant membership in the IBM Academy of Technology. And I just wanted, as your friend, to let you know so that you won't be too disappointed when you're not elected. Now, at that point, I wasn't sure. I don't remember what I said, but I don't remember what I did, because we had just ordered dinner, and I like to eat. So I waited for the dinner to come. I had a wonderful meal, and then I left. I was elected. And once a year, the Academy meets somewhere. So for me, my first year, our newly elected members go through an induction ceremony. The first meeting of the first session is a dinner. We spend the day traveling. In this case, it was Toronto. And so I went to dinner early because I had to leave to go to the rehearsal for the induction ceremony. And I saw this guy sitting having dinner when I was on my way out. So I go straight to him. He's sitting down. I tap him on the shoulder. He looks up and I said, he was about to stand up. Doctor, you don't have to stand. I'm just, I just came over to say hi. And then I left. And so at some point in my IBM career, after about 8 or 9 years, once I did get with this IBM vice president, and she and the team, I found out later, as I mentioned, the team decided I need to leave research. So she was charged with the task of convincing me to leave. And so she said, well, why don't you look for a 2-year assignment somewhere, and then you can use those 2 years, see how things go. You can go back to research after that. So I did. I ended up with a 2-year assignment in San Jose, California at the IBM Silicon Valley Lab. And within 2 weeks, I was like, I'm not going back to research, right? The people were nicer, they were friendly. You don't really know sometimes when you're in a hostile environment until you get out of that environment. So after, 2 weeks, people were nice. I actually ran into women in the bathroom. I was so excited. Because that never happened, in the 9 years at Watson Research Center. And so I did not stay in California. I ended up with a role in Austin, Texas. And I spent several years in that role. Did get a promotion. One story about that is I asked this woman, also an IBM fellow that I met as part of an inventor panel for an internal conference. So I got to know her, and I asked her to be a reference for my promotion. And she agreed. She said, send me your vita, so I want to make sure that, I state what you've done correctly. And I did. What I did not know at the time is that she looked at what I sent her, and she sent it to an IBMer who was an immediate past president of IEEE. And she said, I think Sandra can be an IEEE fellow. What do you think? And so he responded, not only do I think she can be an IEEE fellow, I will sponsor her. And so she calls me on a Saturday morning. When I was about to leave, the phone rang. That was before cell phones, right? And I'm thinking, should I answer that? I'll answer it. Hello, Sandra. I got so-and-so to sponsor you to be an IEEE fellow. I want you to go to the IEEE website, find all the IEEE fellows you know, put them in 3 categories. Those who you know will support you, those who you think may support you, and those who forget about it, right? And I said, well, hello, how are you? She never asked me if I was interested, right? And so I said, this lady means well. But this is a good old boys network, right? There's no way this is going to happen for me. But since she's so passionate about it, I'll go along with it, which I did. And what they did is, she was an IEEE fellow, she took her package and the guy that was a past president of IEEE, they spent 2 hours with me. They told me to put a draft application together based upon what she said. And line by line, change this, change that, change this, change that. And I became an IEEE fellow. First black woman ever. And so, actually, she made it over. Wow, you became a fellow. I didn't think that was possible. That's hope for me. But yeah, that's how that happened. Right? And so, one summer when I went to visit Africa for the first time, I visited a slave castle. And that was an experience I will never forget. It was like a eureka moment. You go through the dungeon. I'm not going to go through the gory details, but it was just awful the way the captured Africans were treated. This castle was like right on the Atlantic Ocean. It looked beautiful, beautiful white castle from the outside, but it was just horrible on the inside. And as part of the tour, each tourist could go through what they called the door of no return. It really wasn't a door, it was like 2 concrete slabs that were wide enough to go through it, and there was a ledge that was about 5 feet above the ground, the ocean right in front. And so when I went through that ledge, I remember the plaque at the door entering the castle that said, for those who enter here, particularly those who are descendants of those who went through these doors, may you never forget, and some come back to help rebuild the continent. And so it was that experience where I had this eureka moment to say, I'm one of those descendants. They helped come and use technology to rebuild the continent of Africa. And so I began to look for opportunities to do that within IBM, look for IBM jobs somewhere in Africa. Eventually found that opportunity, but not a technical role, a business role, a business development executive. And I learned later they offered me this thinking I was going to turn it down because it wasn't technical, and then I could stop bothering them about looking for a technical opportunity. So they were surprised when I accepted. And my manager said, you can either work in Johannesburg or Dubai. Which do you choose? And I said Johannesburg because I wanted to be on the African continent. But then as I went through the onboarding process, I learned that in South Africa, you have to pay income taxes. But in the United Arab Emirates, you did not. And as an American citizen, no matter where you live, you still have to pay income taxes, right? So I was not interested in paying taxes twice. So off to Dubai I go instead of Johannesburg. But the role that I had required that I travel throughout the continent of Africa and the Middle East, which I did, right? So I spent more time traveling than in Dubai. But when I was there, I had a wonderful time. So it was a good role. And one of my mentors, who I've already mentioned to you, Mark Dean, the PC guy, was also there. He was the CTO for IBM Middle East and Africa. Excuse me. So when I went to him to have one of my regular mentoring conversations, we talked about what I was going to do next. He says to me, well, actually, there's a need to have a role like mine, but instead of all of the Middle East and Africa, it's for Central East and West Africa. So here's my job description. You take it and you write your job description, and I'll go find the money for this job. And that's how I became the CTO for IBM Central East and West Africa. I have something scratching in my throat. So I moved from Dubai to Nairobi, Kenya. But again, traveling all around Africa. It was a wonderful experience. And after about a year, I started thinking about what was it I was going to do next. And I noticed that as I traveled throughout the continent of Africa, I ran into many IBM customers who they were buying things that IBM wanted them to buy and not what they needed. So I saw this as an opportunity to create a consulting company where I could be the technical advisor for these companies that, the C-level executives that I had spoken to for 3 years and therefore built relationships with, and then talk to the IBMs of the world about what they really needed, which more or less cost less than what they were buying. So I left IBM and started this company to do just that. And before long, I learned that while these contacts I had really understood and felt there was a need for this, they were not willing to pay for it. So I did a pivot. I thought about the fact that when I lived in Nairobi, I used mobile money, which is sort of like Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, Cash. But it's a financial account associated with a mobile phone service. And that's because most of the people who live in that part of the world do not have bank accounts, but they have mobile phones. So they use mobile phones, so we use cash apps, mobile money. M-Pesa, to be exact, in Kenya. And also sometimes when I would come home, while I lived there home, I still had my home in North Carolina for vacation. I would try, not vacation, for a break. And would try to send money back to that part of the world. I experienced the pain of, it's high cost, sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it was difficult for the recipients to get to the money. And so that's how I got the idea of creating this mobile app that enables people to quickly transfer money from the US or parts of the West to emerging countries. And the funds were deposited directly into the mobile money accounts. So that's how I created Global Mobile Finance, became an entrepreneur, and developed this mobile app, Ibm. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to start a pilot on that to start sending money to Kenya initially. And as we move forward, we'll increase the number of countries. Right now, only one state, Georgia, because it was the easiest state to get a license for. You need a license in each state in the country. So as we grow, there will be more states and more countries. So that was my journey from IBM to entrepreneurship. But understand, I had reached a point where I had had enough of the microaggressions and just in your face, you don't belong here, you don't measure up. I had enough. And so I was ready to leave and be my own boss and call the shots. It's been a wonderful journey so far. And I have experience with typical entrepreneurs, experience in terms of getting funding. But for me though, because I'm more experienced than a typical entrepreneur who's younger, just starting out. But even with that, folks look at my background, and then they're shocked when I've thought through all of this, and I have responses to all of their questions. And their body language is like, okay, here we go again. So it's been a journey, obstacles, but if you don't know anything else about me, I know how to overcome obstacles. So I know I spent quite a bit of time talking, Like, but I do want to end, if you will, by bringing 3 points to your attention and encourage you to live by them, whether it's in school and work, holistically part of your life. Number 1, know yourself. Know who you are. Know what your capabilities are, right? I mean, you know what you love to do, right? No one can tell you, better than you, right? Know yourself. So that when people come to you with the foolishness of you don't belong here, when you know you do, it just rolls right off of you. It may stick for a little while. Then you just go horseback riding on the beach and everything. Okay. All right. On the cruise, from Galveston. Whatever. But know who you are, know yourself, right? Number 2, make sure you have a support system. Family members, friends, mentors, sponsors. You can call it sponsorship, advocate, champion. Someone who, when the doors are closed and they're talking about who they're going to put in the role, that's before they post a job, by the way. By the time they post the job, they already know who's going to fill it, right? So when that conversation happens, you have someone at the table advocating for you in that role, right? Or, and I gave you examples in my case, create a job for you, or work with them to create a job for you, right? So make sure you have friends, family members, mentors, advocates to help you, support you, even if it's moral support. You can never underestimate the power of moral support, right? To help you through. Someone who's going to tell you when you're not doing the right thing, or someone that's going to provide you with guidance and direction and support. It will make it easier. It will make the difference between making it and not making it in some cases, but make sure you have that support system, okay? And then the third and final thing is, you are the captain of your own ship. No one's going to steer that ship better than you, right? So when someone puts an obstacle in your way, you just go around, steer that ship around them, over them, under them, through them, but you steer the ship, And if you're in a place where things are not happening for you, then you know what to do. You steer the ship, working with your mentors, your sponsors, your family, and your friends to go around. Okay. Now, understand, sometimes you're going to hit a wall, right? Sometimes you're focusing on something that may not be in your best interest. And hitting that wall forces you to look at what you really should be doing instead of what you are doing, right? So even if you think, oh no, this is terrible, what am I going to do? Well, answer that question. Start thinking about what are some other possibilities in terms of what you're going to do, okay? And so if you steer that ship, if you know yourself, and you have that strong support system, that if you know what you know, but you know that you were born to do this, then don't let anybody tell you otherwise, right? Because many times they're playing mind games with you. They see the gifts that you have to impact her because she's very smart or he's very smart. Let me back and play a game with her mind to bring her down. I don't know if you saw the movie King Richard when I think Venus, she was out there playing a game, she was doing well, right? And then the other opponent can't remember the opponent, left to go to the bathroom, and she was gone a very long time. That messed with Venus's mind. And all of a sudden, she was no longer playing as well as she was, right? So people do play mind games, right? But if you know that you were born to do this, yes, Venus lost. Look at where she is now compared to her competitor, right? So things are going to happen, right? But sometimes it's for a reason that you may not realize until you sit down, relax, and think about it, right? Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong when you know you do, right? Now, you don't have to get mad and upset and, tell them where to go. Sometimes the best way is to just show them, to silence them, right? So, be yourself, know yourself, have a strong support system, and you are the captain of your ship. So you steer that ship in a way that's going to make you happy and productive for the rest of your life. So I'm going to stop here. I didn't see any hands up, so